The course of history has often been changed by one person speaking out. William Wilberforce cried out against the institution of slavery. Charles Darwin described how the biodiversity of our world has emerged over billions of years through a process of evolution by natural selection. Mary Wollstonecraft spoke up for the education of women in professions such as medicine at a time when most females were expected to stay at home. As John Stuart Mill wrote, quotes, "If all mankind minus one were of one opinion, and only one person were of the contrary opinion, mankind would be no more justified in silencing that one person than he, if he had the power, would be justified in silencing mankind." End of quote. One reason, but only one, is that all mankind might be wrong, and the one person might be right. The role of the contrarian is not an easy one. He can be vilified, ostracized, silenced. Whistleblowers in particular may bring about great social or economic change or even expose criminal activity, but at enormous cost to themselves and their families. And now with social media, the act of speaking out may lead to being cancelled or having a reputation destroyed. The Contrarian Prize was founded 10 years ago to celebrate the independence, courage and sacrifice of people who have made a meaningful contribution to public debate by standing up for what they believe in. Previous winners have included Toby Young, Catherine Birbal-Singh and Professor Patrick Minford. Ali Miraj is the founder of the Contrarian Prize and he joins me now. The three that we just mentioned there are figures who are somewhat beloved of the right. May I just check that you would also have contrarians who were beloved of the left?
Of course. One of them was the lawyer, Clive Stafford Smith, who believes in standing up for people on death row. He's very much a man of the left. I mean, the initial winner, Michael, was a guy called Michael Woodford, who's a businessman. So he actually won the prize for standing up against basically wrongdoing in his company, the first CEO in history to blow the whistle on his own company when he discovered a $1.7 billion fraud at Olympus. First time in history, he got called in by the board, complained, said he wanted to investigate it, and they fired him. So there are people from different sides of the political spectrum that have won this prize, and it's open to all.
Nominations are made, I presume. Is that how it works?
They are. The nominations are made by the public via the website. And we're looking for 4 different criteria, Michael. And we thought about these very, very carefully when we founded the prize. Independence of thought, courage and conviction in their actions. They should have made a sacrifice for their beliefs. And they should have also introduced new ideas into the public realm or had an impact on the public debate. And there are really 2 types of contrarians, Michael, as I see it. One is the contrarian who's been contrarian, as I would say, since they've been in nappies, the kind of Peter Tatchell of this world, who he's been campaigning since 55 years, since he was 15, right? You have that kind of contrarian, but you also have the other kind of contrarian who comes to a fork in the road and they say, can I take the path of conviction or convenience? Is my career more important than my conscience? And that's where the Michael Woodford Olympus whistleblower type comes in. So, or Robin Cook, who resigned over the Iraq War. You know, I mean, he was never a rebel. So you have 2 types of contrarians, in my view, and both of them have a role to play in British public life. And the reason why I set up this prize, Michael, 10 years ago, was because at that time, back in 2012, if you recall, we had the Hillsborough cover-up, we'd had a financial crisis, we'd had the MP's expenses scandal, we'd had the systematic abuse of kids by certain figures, and you just thought, like, why did no one speak up about this stuff? And for me, it's very personal. I remember when I was standing for Parliament back in 2003, I basically was interviewed about the Iraq War. My party, the Conservative Party at the time, was supporting the war, and I felt that it was wrong, and I stood up against it. And I think it's important to have the courage of your convictions and take the path of not conviction, not convenience, but conviction.
During your list of the excellent criteria on which you judge the prize, you mentioned sacrifice. Give me some examples of what people have sacrificed, not necessarily prize winners, but others who have really paid a price for speaking up.
Well, I mean, Michael Woodford's an example, but if you look at someone like Catherine Birbal-Singh, take her example. Now, she is someone who has set up a school, the Michaela School, that believes in a certain way of teaching, discipline, rigor, standards in the school. And she was vilified for doing this. I remember when she gave that speech some years ago, Michael, in Birmingham, when she was cheered to the rafters by the people in the hall. And I thought that that speech was very punchy. I mean,
Was this at a Conservative Party
This
conference?
was a Conservative Party
Right.
conference.
So that obviously had tainted her in the minds of some people.
Absolutely, and she was very much a person of the left. I mean, she herself says that when she was at university, she was very sort of flirty with Marxism. But she had realised during the course of her teaching, and she taught in a number of different schools, that those teaching methods were not working. The orthodoxy that was prevailing in the educational system was failing kids. So she spoke out. That sacrifice that she made was effectively she got pushed out of her job as a deputy head in Camberwell and was in the wilderness for like 3 to 4 years trying to find out what to do with her life. She was trying to set up a school in the face of horrendous opposition. And you find this during history, Michael. I mean, people who speak up, look at Tom Paine, back in the 18th century, a person who was political philosopher, fundamentally had an impact on both the French Revolution and the American Revolution. At his death, 6 people turned up when he died. Same with Galileo Galilei. He was talking about the Copernican theory that the Earth moves around the sun, condemned as a heretic and had to live under house arrest. So it was absolutely, the way you framed it at the beginning, I totally agree with, in terms of these people are often dismissed as fruitcakes, dissenters, nutcases. But often, in time, they are proved to be right. And that we should have respect for people who are contrarian. I'm not saying you can have contrarians everywhere.
But even if they're not right, they'll still be defended.
Absolutely correct. Because for me, they're like, Michael, I think that they're the yeast in the mix. I mean, I'm not saying that you could have, for example, a parliament. Look, Simon Danczuk, a Labour MP, by the way, won the prize. He won it because he spoke out against child abuse. He was calling at the time for an inquiry from the Home Secretary.
Rochdale.
Absolutely. He talked out about that. Now, I'm not saying that you can run a country with 650 contrarians in Parliament. You get very little done. But you need them. They're the yeast in the mix. They are the people who speak truth to power. They are unbowed and uncowed in their defence of what they actually believe. And I think that's right. And I also think that, by the way, there are also, as I say, the whistleblower types who never sought to be contrarian, but they come to that fork in the road where they can stay silent or speak out. And that takes courage and conviction to do it.
Is the lot of the contrarian getting worse because of social media at the moment?
I think it's very difficult to be contrarian now. And in fact, some positions that were considered quite mainstream are now considered contrarian. So a lot of the stuff about the whole trans debate and about biological sex and all these things, which some people find very confusing. Even if you wanted to express an opinion about the importance of biological sex, you're closed down. And that creates a lot of problems. I mean, we should be able to have an open, respectful discourse. Social media, Michael, is poisonous, absolutely poisonous. It actually, all these algorithms push people to the fringes and to the edge, to get clicks, to get noticed, and that's not a way to have a nuanced argument. A lot of these issues that we're dealing with at the moment, and look at the state the country's in at the moment, are nuanced, they're difficult. And I remember back in 2000, Michael, when you gave that speech, I was in the hall in Bournemouth when you gave that speech to the Conservative Party, and you actually came out, you showed courage at the time, by giving them a lot of home truths at the time about how to get re-elected. They had to actually move towards the centre, move towards respecting people of different sexuality, move towards respecting people of different ethnic backgrounds. I remember that, and that took a lot of guts.
Well, thank you for saying that. But in view of what you say about the deteriorating situation in social media, what words of encouragement could you say to a contrarian? Let's say that someone at the moment is wrestling with an issue at their employer. They see something terrible that's going on and they're worried about whether to speak up or not. What words of encouragement?
Well, I think you can find a way. It is difficult sometimes because debate is basically closed down, and it's been closed down across the thing. And a lot of people say that, no, this is all imagined and it's all fine. It's not. I mean, you look at a report by Policy Exchange for people on university campuses, academics, for example, 50% of them are self-censoring because they feel that if their views do not conform to those that are considered acceptable, they will hamper their chances of career advancement. And in the academic world in particular, Michael, it's all peer-reviewed. So what we need is some decency in the discourse, some respect for people of different views. We've got to also build in resilience. I mean, Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Coddling of the American Mind. The fact that, we're so fragile now that we can't hear anything we disagree with, and it affects us. I mean, almost psychologically affects us. This is wrong. We need to teach people resilience and to conduct debate in a respectful but robust manner.
Is your prize helping?
I think it's never been a more important time for the prize. I must say, Michael, I've had moments during the 10 years when, particularly in the last year or so, when I thought, can I actually run a prize where you've actually got people who are being nominated for it, sometimes who feel it's not in good faith. They think, oh, there must be some agenda, or they don't want to be seen to win a prize which will upset their former tribe that they were belonged to, which they've now been expelled by, which they're trying to paper over the cracks quickly to get back into again. So you need to have a certain amount of good faith to run a prize like this, but I think it's fundamentally important. I believe that contrarians are the ones that often advance society, and as you say, even if they don't, they hold us to account. They make us almost improve our own arguments. I mean, if you're just closing down debate and speaking to people you agree with, how do you, as Karl Popper said, actually have that argumentation and disputation where you actually advance your theory and, in fact, even make it better when you actually argue against someone who tears it apart? I mean, how do we do that, Michael?
So Karl Popper, Galileo, John Stuart Mill, Thomas Paine, we've had them all this morning on TV News.